What if I told you that the moment someone disrespects you, they're not actually attacking you? They're revealing their own desperate need to feel powerful. Think about it. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every attempt to mock your worth is nothing more than a psychological test, a probe to see if they can penetrate your defenses and steal your energy. Has this ever happened to you? You're in a meeting, at a social gathering, or even just walking down the street, and someone decides to throw a verbal jab your way. Maybe they interrupt you mid-sentence. Maybe they dismiss your ideas with a condescending smirk, or perhaps they outright insult you in front of others. In that split second, you feel that familiar surge. Your heart races, your jaw tightens, and every fiber of your being screams for retaliation. You want to fire back, to defend your honor, to show them they can't treat you that way. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. But what if that reaction is exactly what makes you weak? What if every time you scramble to defend yourself, you're actually handing over your power on a silver platter? The truth that most people never grasp is that disrespect is rarely about you. It's about them. When someone attempts to diminish your worth, they're broadcasting their own insecurities to the world. They're telling you, without saying it directly, that your presence threatens them, that your confidence exposes their fragility, that your success highlights their failures. The disrespect is their confession, not your condemnation. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. There's an ancient strategy, one that Niccolo Machiavelli understood centuries ago, that transforms every moment of disrespect into an opportunity for dominance. It's not about becoming aggressive or matching their energy. It's about something far more powerful, the strategic use of silence. Most men believe that silence equals weakness, that not responding means you're too afraid to fight back. This couldn't be further from the truth. Your silence, when wielded correctly, becomes the sharpest weapon in your arsenal. It creates an invisible pressure that builds in the space between their words and your response. While they're expecting fireworks, you give them nothing but empty air. And that emptiness begins to consume them. Picture this. Someone insults you, and instead of the explosion they anticipated, you simply pause. You look at them with calm, measured eyes. You don't flinch, you don't defend, you don't explain. The silence stretches, and suddenly the power dynamic shifts. They start to wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, why their words didn't land the way they expected. That doubt, that uncertainty, it's your silence working its magic, turning their own imagination against them. The psychological pressure you create through strategic absence is unlike anything they've experienced before. When you refuse to give them the reaction they crave, when you deny them the emotional response that would validate their attack, something fascinating happens. Their words begin to echo back at them, bouncing around in their own mind with increasing intensity. The very insult they hurled at you becomes their own torment, replaying on an endless loop until they question whether they've made a terrible mistake. But this is just the beginning of understanding true power dynamics, and there's so much more beneath the surface. If you value deep insights over surface-level advice, you belong here. Subscribe, because this level of psychological understanding isn't available everywhere, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, I want to go even deeper into this transformation, because there's a hidden truth about how predators operate that most people completely miss. Think about it. When was the last time you heard a lion announce its presence before an attack? When did a shark warn its prey that danger was approaching? Never. Real predators understand something profound about power. The most dangerous force in nature doesn't need to make noise to prove its strength. This is where your entire mindset needs to shift. The moment you feel that urge to immediately respond to disrespect, you're thinking like prey, not like a predator. Prey animals make noise when threatened. They squeal, they run, they create chaos. But predators, they become perfectly still. They watch. They study every movement, every weakness, every opportunity. They wait until their target is already psychologically broken by the uncertainty of not knowing when or how the strike will come. Your silence isn't passivity, it's calculated patience. While the person who disrespected you is expecting an immediate reaction, you're doing something far more powerful. You're letting them marinate in their own anxiety, wondering what's going through your mind, questioning whether they've just awakened something they can't control. That uncertainty becomes their prison, and you haven't even moved a muscle. But here's where the real revelation happens. Most men believe that defending themselves when attacked shows strength. They think that jumping into the argument, explaining their worth, or firing back with their own insults demonstrates power. This belief system is precisely what keeps them trapped in weakness. The moment you scramble to defend yourself, you're unconsciously admitting that their words have the power to wound you. You're confessing that their opinion of you matters enough to disrupt your peace. True power radiates from a completely different place. It exists not in what you do, but in the unshakable aura you carry when you do absolutely nothing. This presence is what separates leaders from followers, predators from prey, the untouchable from the vulnerable. When you remain composed in the face of disrespect, something magical happens. Your stillness becomes a mirror that reflects their desperation back at them. Think of composure as invisible armor. Each insult they throw at you simply bounces off, absorbed by your unshakable frame. But here's the beautiful irony. While their words can't penetrate your defenses, your silence penetrates theirs completely. With every second that passes without a reaction from you, they become more exposed, more desperate, more aware of how small their attack really was. Your calm presence makes their aggression look childish by comparison. This armor of composure isn't something you put on when convenient. It becomes who you are. It's a fundamental shift in how you show up in the world. When someone senses that their words can't move you, that their disrespect can't shake your foundation, they're forced to confront something uncomfortable, their own powerlessness in your presence. The impact of this approach extends far beyond individual encounters. People begin to recognize that you operate on a different level entirely. They sense that testing you is pointless because you don't play by the same emotional rules that govern most interactions. This recognition spreads, creating a reputation that precedes you into every room, every conversation, every relationship. Behind the scenes of every interaction, you're gathering intelligence while others are wasting energy. Their desperate attempts to get a reaction reveal everything you need to know about their character, their fears, their triggers. Meanwhile, you remain a mystery to them, calm, collected, completely in control of your own emotional state. Write in the comments, "I choose composure over chaos," and let me know you're ready to discover what happens when this principle becomes second nature. Now, I want to go even deeper into what creates this unbreakable foundation, because there's something most people don't realize about personal power. You carry around an invisible wall. Think of it as your frame of self-respect. This barrier is completely impenetrable, but here's the catch. It can only be broken if you hand someone else the tools to destroy it. Every time you feel compelled to argue, when someone disrespects you, you're literally handing them a sledgehammer and pointing to the exact spot where they should strike. The moment you engage in their game, trying to prove your worth through words, you've already lost. You've admitted that their opinion has the power to shake your foundation, but when you remain cold and completely unshaken, you demonstrate something that terrifies people: true invulnerability. This transformation in your mindset changes everything about how others perceive and interact with you. Think about how royalty operates throughout history. A king never argues with peasants, not because he's arrogant, but because he understands a fundamental truth about power dynamics. Engaging would be beneath him, and more importantly, it would diminish his authority. His silence doesn't just communicate indifference, it bends the entire room to his presence. When you adopt this royal indifference, something remarkable happens in your daily interactions. People who attempt to disrespect you suddenly find themselves crushed under the weight of their own weakness. Your refusal to descend to their level makes their behavior look petty and desperate. They're left standing there, waiting for a reaction that will never come, slowly realizing how foolish they appear. But there's an even more powerful weapon in this arsenal, one that cuts deeper than any verbal response ever could. Sometimes, the most devastating response to disrespect isn't silence in their presence, but your complete and total absence. When you remove your time, your attention, your very presence from someone who has crossed the line, you deliver a blow that resonates far longer than any insult. This isn't about running away or avoiding confrontation. It's about strategic withdrawal. You're making a conscious decision that their behavior doesn't deserve access to your energy. The impact of this choice reverberates through their consciousness in ways they never expected. Suddenly, they're forced to confront the void left by your departure, and that emptiness becomes more painful than any words you could have spoken. Hit that like button if this strategic approach to handling disrespect resonated with you. Your like tells me you understand the difference between reacting and responding. Behind the scenes of every successful person's journey, you'll find this pattern repeated countless times. They've learned to guard their presence like a precious resource, offering it only to those who demonstrate genuine respect. This selective availability creates a powerful dynamic where people begin to value access to you rather than taking it for granted. The revelations that come from this approach extend far beyond individual encounters. You start to notice how differently people treat you when they realize you're willing to completely remove yourself from disrespectful situations. They become more careful with their words, more thoughtful in their approach, more aware that their behavior has real consequences. Your absence teaches lessons that your presence never could. It demonstrates that you have options, that you don't need anyone specific in your life, that you're perfectly content walking away from situations that don't serve you. This level of self-respect creates a magnetic quality that draws the right people toward you while naturally repelling those who would waste your time. Put "my presence is earned, not given" in the comments if you're beginning to see how this principle could revolutionize every relationship in your life. Now, I want to go even deeper into what happens inside the mind of someone who realizes they've pushed you away, because this psychological process is where the real transformation occurs. When you withdraw your presence from someone who has disrespected you, you create something far more powerful than anger or retaliation. You create a void. This emptiness where your energy once existed becomes a constant reminder of what they've lost through their poor decisions. The beautiful thing about this approach is that you don't have to say a single word about what they did wrong. Your absence speaks louder than any lecture ever could. They begin to replay the interaction in their mind, questioning their choices, wondering what they could have done differently. The void of your value forces them to confront their own behavior without you having to become their teacher or their judge. This is where the hidden truth about human psychology reveals itself. People don't truly appreciate what they have until it's gone, and your strategic withdrawal makes them acutely aware of the impact you had on their life. Maybe you were the one who listened to their problems, who offered support during difficult times, who brought positive energy to their day. Now that warmth, that attention, that presence has vanished, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence that grows heavier with each passing day. Behind the scenes of every successful relationship, whether personal or professional, you'll find this delicate balance between presence and absence. Your presence becomes a form of power, When you choose to be available, to engage, to invest your energy in someone, it carries weight because they know it's a conscious choice. But your absence transforms into punishment, a consequence that teaches lessons more effectively than any argument ever could. The key is using both tools with surgical precision. You're not playing games or being manipulative. You're simply demonstrating that respect is a requirement for access to you. This mindset shift changes how people approach you. They become more thoughtful, more considerate, more aware that their behavior has real consequences in the form of gaining or losing your presence. But there's another revelation that emerges from this journey of personal development. Every time someone disrespects you, they're actually providing you with valuable intelligence about their character. Their words and actions reveal far more about their internal state than they realize. When someone mocks you, they're displaying their own insecurities. When they try to diminish you, they're revealing their envy. When they attack your success, they're confessing their own failures. Instead of taking these attacks personally, you can learn to see them as data points. You're gathering information about who this person really is behind their public facade. Are they the type who needs to tear others down to feel good about themselves? Do they operate from a place of scarcity and competition rather than abundance? Are they so threatened by your progress that they feel compelled to sabotage it? This intelligence becomes incredibly valuable in your future interactions with them and others like them. You start to recognize patterns in human behavior, understanding the motivations that drive different types of people. Armed with this knowledge, you can predict their moves, protect yourself from their manipulations, and even use their own psychology against them when necessary. The impact of this approach extends beyond individual encounters. You develop a reputation as someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect, someone whose boundaries are real and enforced, someone whose presence is valued precisely because it can be withdrawn. Write, "I see through the masks" in the comments if you're starting to recognize how this intelligence gathering completely changes the power dynamic in your relationships. Now, I want to go even deeper into this transformation of perspective, because once you understand how to read between the lines of human behavior, every interaction becomes a window into someone's soul. When a person chooses to disrespect you, they're unwittingly handing you a psychological profile of their deepest insecurities and fears. The person who mocks your ambitions is revealing their own regret about abandoned dreams. The one who attacks your success is confessing their bitterness about their own failures. This shift in mindset changes everything about how you navigate relationships and power dynamics. Instead of feeling wounded by their words, you start seeing them as valuable intelligence. You're no longer the target. You're the analyst, quietly gathering data about who they really are beneath their carefully constructed public image. This detached observation gives you an incredible advantage, because while they're busy trying to hurt you, you're busy understanding them. The journey from reactive victim to strategic observer represents one of the most profound transformations a person can undergo. You stop taking things personally and start recognizing patterns. The colleague who constantly interrupts you in meetings isn't just being rude. They're desperate to be seen as important. The friend who always has something negative to say about your progress isn't just being unsupportive. They're struggling with their own sense of inadequacy. Subscribe if you're serious about understanding the real mechanics of influence and respect. This community values substance over quick fixes, and that's exactly what we deliver. Behind the scenes of every disrespectful encounter, there's a story of someone's internal battle playing out through their external behavior. Once you recognize this hidden truth, you gain access to a level of psychological leverage that most people never even realize exists. You can predict their next moves, anticipate their triggers, and position yourself strategically in ways that serve your interests. But the real power comes from understanding that your presence and absence are tools that should be wielded with the precision of a surgeon. Your presence isn't something you give away freely to anyone who demands it. When you choose to be present, to engage, to invest your energy in someone, it becomes a gift that carries weight precisely because it can be withdrawn. People sense this scarcity, this selectivity, and it makes them value access to you in ways they never did before. Your absence, on the other hand, becomes the most effective teacher they'll ever encounter. It doesn't argue, it doesn't explain, it doesn't justify. It simply demonstrates consequences. When someone realizes they've lost access to your energy, your insights, your support, or simply your pleasant company, the lesson penetrates deeper than any lecture could. The void left by your departure forces them to confront the impact of their choices without you having to say a word. This approach creates a natural filtering system in your life. People who truly value you learn to treat you with respect because they understand what they stand to lose. Those who don't learn this lesson gradually remove themselves from your circle through their own poor decisions. You're not actively pushing anyone away. You're simply maintaining standards that naturally separate the wheat from the chaff. The revelations that emerge from this approach extend far beyond individual relationships. You develop an intuitive understanding of human nature that serves you in every area of life. You can spot manipulators before they gain access to your vulnerabilities. You can identify genuine people who deserve your trust and investment. Put "I choose quality over quantity" in the comments if you're ready to discover how this selective approach to relationships creates a completely different quality of life. Now, I want to go even deeper into what separates those who command respect from those who constantly struggle for it, because there's a fundamental difference in how they handle their emotional responses. When someone disrespects you, your immediate reaction reveals everything about your level of personal development. The man who explodes in anger, who feels compelled to defend himself loudly, who lets his emotions take control. He's broadcasting his vulnerabilities to everyone watching, but the man who remains completely calm while others lose their composure, he's operating from an entirely different level of consciousness. While the angry person is busy revealing his triggers and insecurities, the composed person is quietly cataloging the weaknesses of everyone around him. This isn't just about appearing strong. It's about actually becoming strategically superior in every interaction. The transformation happens when you realize that every insult someone throws at you is like a window into their psychological state. Think about the different ways people try to tear you down, because each method reveals something specific about their internal struggles. The person who mocks your appearance is struggling with their own self-image. The one who questions your intelligence is insecure about their own capabilities. The individual who publicly tries to embarrass you is desperately seeking validation from an audience because they feel invisible in their own life. This hidden truth changes everything about how you interpret human behavior. Behind the scenes of every disrespectful encounter, there's someone projecting their own pain onto you. The colleague who constantly undermines your ideas isn't responding to anything you've actually done wrong. They're responding to their own fear of being overlooked or replaced. The friend who always finds something negative to say about your progress isn't being helpful. They're managing their own feelings of being left behind. Once you understand this psychological dynamic, disrespect stops feeling personal and starts feeling informational. You're no longer the victim of someone else's bad behavior. You're the recipient of valuable intelligence about their character, their fears, and their motivations. This shift in perspective is incredibly liberating, because it removes the emotional sting from their words while giving you strategic advantages in future interactions. The journey from taking things personally to seeing them objectively represents one of the most powerful mindset shifts you can make. Instead of feeling hurt or angry when someone disrespects you, you start feeling curious. What insecurity is driving this behavior? What fear is making them lash out? What need are they trying to meet through this attack? These questions transform you from a reactive participant into a strategic observer. The impact of this approach extends far beyond individual encounters. You develop what I call emotional immunity, the ability to remain unaffected by others' attempts to disturb your peace while simultaneously gaining insights that serve your long-term interests. People sense this immunity, and it makes them less likely to test you because they instinctively recognize that their usual tactics won't work. The revelations continue to unfold as you practice this approach. You notice patterns in how different personality types operate. You become skilled at predicting behavior based on psychological profiles. You learn to position yourself advantageously in relationships and negotiations because you understand what really motivates people beneath their surface presentations. Drop "I see the game behind the game" in the comments if you're beginning to recognize how this emotional detachment completely transforms your approach to every relationship and conflict. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this intelligence transforms from simple observation into actual strategic advantage, because once you've identified someone's psychological vulnerabilities, you hold something far more powerful than any weapon. You hold the key to their own undoing. The person who revealed their insecurity through disrespect has just handed you a roadmap to their weaknesses, and the truly strategic mind knows exactly how to use this information. This is where the transformation from victim to strategist becomes complete. Instead of allowing their disrespect to wound you, you've converted it into leverage. You now understand what triggers them, what fears drive their behavior, what insecurities make them act out. Armed with this knowledge, you can predict their moves, avoid their traps, and when necessary, use their own psychology against them with surgical precision. The beauty of this approach lies in its subtlety. You're not plotting revenge or seeking to destroy anyone. You're simply positioning yourself advantageously based on the information they freely provided. When you know someone attacks others out of jealousy, you can anticipate their behavior when you achieve success. When you recognize that someone's criticism stems from their own failures, you can dismiss their opinions without internal conflict. When you see that someone's aggression masks deep insecurity, you can remain unmoved by their attempts to intimidate. Every insult, every challenge, every act of disrespect becomes a mistake on their part, an error they make by revealing more about themselves than they intended. The wise person doesn't react emotionally to these mistakes. Instead, they record them silently, storing this intelligence for future use. Think of it as building a psychological portfolio on everyone you encounter, understanding their motivations, fears, and triggers so thoroughly that you're always 3 steps ahead. Behind the scenes of every successful person's journey, you'll find this pattern of converting negative energy into positive momentum. They've learned to treat disrespect not as an attack to be deflected, but as fuel to be harvested. The energy that others waste in anger, hurt feelings, and defensive reactions becomes the very power source that drives their rise to dominance. This mindset shift represents one of the most profound revelations about human psychology and success. Most people allow disrespect to drain their energy, to disturb their peace, to derail their focus. They burn through their emotional reserves, defending themselves or seeking validation. But the strategic mind operates differently. It captures that energy, refines it, and channels it toward achieving goals. The impact of this approach extends far beyond individual encounters. You develop an almost supernatural ability to remain unshaken by what would devastate others, while simultaneously building an arsenal of insights about human nature. People sense this shift in you. They recognize that their usual tactics don't work, that their attempts to diminish you somehow make you stronger instead. The transformation becomes visible in how you carry yourself, how you respond to challenges, how you navigate complex social dynamics. You're no longer reactive, but proactive, no longer defensive, but strategically positioned, no longer affected by others' opinions, but informed by their psychological revelations. I convert obstacles into advantages. In the comments, if you're starting to see how this complete reframe of disrespect could revolutionize not just your relationships, but your entire approach to personal power and success. Now I want to go even deeper into what separates those who truly command respect from those who simply demand it, because there's a fundamental difference in how they handle the moment when provocation strikes. The person who immediately explodes in anger, who lets their emotions dictate their response, who reacts from impulse rather than intention. They're broadcasting their weaknesses to everyone watching. They've become predictable, exploitable, controllable. True power isn't measured by the volume of your voice or the intensity of your reaction. It's measured by the deliberate precision of your choices, especially when every instinct is screaming at you to lash out. This discipline transforms you from someone who can be manipulated through emotional triggers into someone who remains mysteriously unshakable no matter what provocation comes your way. The transformation that occurs when you master this level of self-control changes everything about how others perceive and interact with you. Machiavelli understood something profound about human psychology. Rulers who maintain their composure, even under intense provocation, become genuinely terrifying to their opponents. Why? Because anger is predictable. You can anticipate how an angry person will respond, what buttons to push, how to manipulate their emotions to your advantage. But controlled silence, that's terrifying because it's completely unpredictable. When you refuse to give others the emotional reaction they're seeking, when you respond with calculated stillness instead of reactive fury, you create a psychological dynamic that unsettles even the most confident provocateurs. They were prepared for your anger, your defensiveness, your hurt feelings. They had strategies ready to exploit those emotions. But your calm, measured non-response, that's something they didn't prepare for, and it leaves them fumbling in uncertainty. Behind the scenes of every interaction, there's a battle for psychological control, and the person who can delay their response, who doesn't feel compelled to answer instantly, who refuses to reveal their hand in emotional moments, that person holds all the cards. Time becomes your weapon because every second that passes without your expected reaction builds tension in the other person's mind. They start questioning themselves, wondering if they've gone too far, imagining consequences they can't predict. This strategic delay isn't about being slow to respond, it's about being intentional. You're not frozen by indecision. You're operating from a place of such deep confidence that you don't feel any urgency to defend yourself immediately. The pause itself communicates something powerful, that their words don't carry enough weight to disturb your peace, that their opinion doesn't matter enough to warrant an instant response. The impact of this approach ripples through every area of your life. People begin to recognize that you operate differently, that the usual tactics for getting under someone's skin simply don't work on you. This recognition creates a natural filtering effect. Those who respect authentic strength are drawn to you, while those who rely on emotional manipulation find themselves naturally repelled by your unshakable frame. The journey toward this level of emotional mastery requires daily practice and conscious decision-making. Each time you feel that familiar surge of defensive anger, each moment when someone tries to bait you into a reaction, you have an opportunity to strengthen this psychological muscle. Write, "I choose my timing" in the comments if you're ready to discover how this mastery of controlled response becomes the foundation for unshakable personal power. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this pause becomes your most devastating psychological weapon, because what happens in that silence is far more destructive to your opponent than anything you could say. The longer you wait to respond, the more their own words begin to echo back at them. With increasing intensity, they start to hear their insult through different ears, not as the confident attack they intended, but as the desperate, revealing statement it actually was. This hesitation you create isn't empty space. It's loaded with possibility, pregnant with consequences they can't predict. Their mind begins racing, filling that void with their own worst fears. Did they go too far? Are you planning something? Why aren't you reacting the way they expected? That uncertainty becomes their prison, and you didn't have to lift a finger to build it. The transformation that occurs during these moments of strategic silence changes the entire power dynamic. While they're wrestling with doubt and second-guessing their decision to provoke you, you're operating from a place of complete calm, observing their psychological deterioration with detached interest. You've shifted from being the target of their attack to being the architect of their discomfort. When you finally do choose to respond, the contrast is devastating. After that loaded pause, your words carry exponentially more weight. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They think the response needs to be lengthy, explanatory, or emotionally charged. The opposite is true. Your response should be surgical, precise, minimal, and ice-cold. A single sharp statement that cuts to the bone. A measured withdrawal that speaks volumes. Or sometimes just a glance so controlled and penetrating that it reminds them of consequences they can't even articulate. Behind the scenes of this entire interaction, your body language is telling a story that's even more powerful than your words or silence. Every physical movement, every micro-expression, every breath is either reinforcing your strength or betraying your emotions. The person who has mastered this level of self-control never lets their body language give away their internal state. Their stillness becomes a form of strength that radiates throughout the room. This discipline extends to the most subtle details, the way you breathe, the steadiness of your gaze, the relaxation of your shoulders. Controlled breathing doesn't just project power. It actually creates it by keeping your nervous system regulated while others become increasingly agitated. Your physical composure becomes proof of your psychological mastery, and everyone present can sense this difference. The impact of this total body control creates an almost supernatural presence. People begin to recognize that you're operating from a completely different level of consciousness, where external provocation simply cannot disturb your internal equilibrium. This recognition changes how they approach you, how they speak around you, how they consider their words before directing them toward you. The journey toward this mastery requires constant awareness and practice. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to strengthen your discipline, to refine your control, to demonstrate through your very presence that you are fundamentally unshakable. Type, "My composure is my strength," in the comments if you're beginning to understand how this complete mastery of self transforms not just individual encounters, but your entire relationship with power and respect. Now, I want to go even deeper into what it truly means to control yourself so completely that you naturally control every room you enter, because this transformation represents the ultimate shift in personal power dynamics. When you reach this level of self-mastery, something fascinating happens. You stop being reactive to other people's energy and start setting the emotional tone for every interaction. The person who cannot be provoked, who remains unshakable regardless of what's thrown at them, becomes the gravitational center that everyone else orbits around. This is where the hidden truth about leadership and influence reveals itself. It's not the loudest person who controls the conversation, not the most aggressive who wins the conflict, not the most emotional who gets their way. It's the person who maintains such complete internal discipline that external chaos simply cannot touch them. When others sense this unshakable core, they unconsciously adjust their behavior to match your energy rather than trying to disrupt it. Behind the scenes of every power struggle, there are really two different games being played simultaneously. Most people are playing the emotional, a game, reacting, defending, explaining, justifying, seeking validation. But you're playing an entirely different game, one driven by strategy rather than impulse. This shift in approach makes it impossible for your opponents to win because they're using emotional weapons against someone who operates from pure logic and calculated intention. Think about what happens when someone tries to bait you into anger, but you respond with strategic calm. They came prepared for an emotional battle, but you've changed the rules entirely. They're swinging wildly at a target that's no longer there, exhausting themselves against an opponent who won't engage on their terms. This is how you make others play your game, by refusing to participate in theirs. The journey toward this level of mastery requires a fundamental shift in how you view and use your personal energy. Most people scatter their energy like coins thrown carelessly on the ground. They waste it defending themselves to people whose opinions don't matter, proving their worth to those who will never appreciate it, engaging in pointless arguments with individuals who thrive on conflict. This scattered approach leaves them drained, reactive, and ultimately powerless. But the strategic mind operates differently. It conserves energy like a precious resource, understanding that every bit of attention, every moment of focus, every ounce of emotional investment should be deployed deliberately toward goals that actually serve your rise. When you stop wasting energy trying to prove yourself to fools, something remarkable happens. That conserved power becomes available for the pursuits and relationships that genuinely matter. The impact of this energy conservation extends beyond individual interactions. You develop a natural magnetism that draws the right people toward you while repelling those who would drain your resources. People sense when someone operates from abundance rather than scarcity, from strategy rather than reactivity, from choice rather than compulsion. The revelations continue as you practice this discipline. You discover that most conflicts resolve themselves when you simply refuse to participate in the emotional drama. You realize that respect comes not from defending your worth, but from demonstrating it through your unshakable presence. Put "I guard my energy like gold" in the comments if you're starting to see how this complete transformation of your approach to conflict and disrespect could change everything about your personal and professional relationships. Now, I want to go even deeper into a fundamental truth about human psychology that most people completely misunderstand, because there's a delicate balance between respect and fear that determines whether others see you as someone to value or someone to exploit. Machiavelli discovered something profound about this dynamic. Respect and fear aren't enemies. They're actually brothers working together to create lasting influence. People often believe that being loved is the ultimate goal, but love is fragile, conditional, and changes the moment circumstances shift. Fear, on the other hand, has staying power. When someone understands that crossing you has real consequences, that knowledge doesn't fade with their mood or disappear when times get tough. The transformation occurs when you realize that the most respected people in any environment aren't necessarily the most liked. They're the ones whose boundaries are so clearly established that others naturally hesitate before testing them. This is where the hidden truth about boundary testing reveals itself. Every act of disrespect is fundamentally a probe, a psychological experiment to determine whether you can be used without consequence. When someone interrupts you, dismisses your ideas, or openly mocks you, they're not just being rude, they're conducting reconnaissance. They're trying to discover if your boundaries are real walls or mere suggestions, if your standards have teeth or if they're just for show. Behind the scenes of every interaction, people are unconsciously categorizing you into one of two groups: those who enforce their standards and those who merely hope others will respect them voluntarily. The person who immediately reacts with explanation, justification, or pleading has revealed that their boundaries are negotiable. But the person whose silence carries weight, whose pause communicates consequence, whose very stillness suggests that crossing them would be unwise, that person has built something far more valuable than popularity. Think of yourself as a fortress. The fortress with open gates, welcoming everyone regardless of their intentions, quickly becomes overrun by those who take advantage of such accessibility. But the fortress that requires visitors to demonstrate respect before gaining entry, that makes access feel earned rather than automatic, becomes a place that people approach with genuine appreciation for the privilege. The journey toward this fortress-like mentality changes how you navigate every relationship and interaction. You stop trying to convince people to treat you well and start demonstrating through your responses that treating you poorly has costs they don't want to pay. This shift creates a natural filtering system where quality people are drawn to your strength, while those looking for easy targets naturally move towards softer options. The impact of this approach extends beyond individual encounters into your overall reputation and presence. People begin to recognize that you operate differently, that the usual tactics for manipulation and exploitation simply don't work on you. This recognition spreads through social and professional networks, creating an aura that precedes you into new situations. The revelations continue as you practice this discipline. You discover that most people actually prefer interacting with someone who has clear, enforced boundaries, because it creates a sense of safety and predictability in the relationship. Drop "I am my own fortress" in the comments if you're beginning to see how this boundary enforcement mindset could completely transform how others perceive and treat you in every area of life. Now, I want to go even deeper into what happens in the psychological space that your silence creates, because there's something almost supernatural about how uncertainty affects the human mind. When you respond with calm stillness instead of the expected noise, you're not just refusing to engage, you're creating a void that the other person's imagination rushes to fill. That void becomes pregnant with possibility, and human beings naturally fear the unknown more than any concrete threat. This transformation in your approach changes the entire dynamic of power. While they were prepared for argument, defensiveness, or emotional reaction, your silence leaves them grappling with questions they can't answer. What are you thinking? What are you planning? Did they just cross a line they'll regret? That uncertainty breeds a fear far more potent than any angry response could generate, because fear of the unknown taps into our most primal psychological triggers. Behind the scenes of this interaction, something fascinating is occurring. Your silence is forcing them to confront their own conscience, to replay their words and wonder if they've made a mistake. Without you saying anything, their own mind becomes your ally, generating doubt and anxiety that grows stronger with each passing moment. The longer you remain silent, the more their imagination works against them. But here's where many people make a critical error in their journey toward personal power. They believe that silence alone is enough, that the mere act of not responding grants them some mystical advantage. The hidden truth is that silence, without the ability to enforce consequences, is just emptiness masquerading as strength. Your silence is only powerful when it's backed by genuine action, when there are real costs for those who cross your boundaries. This is where the difference between appearing strong and actually being strong becomes crystal clear. The person who remains silent but has no follow-through options is simply avoiding confrontation. But the person whose silence carries the weight of potential consequences, withdrawal, removal of benefits, loss of access, professional ramifications, that silence becomes a weapon that people instinctively fear to test. The most devastating consequence you can deploy is often the most subtle one: strategic withdrawal. When you cut off your presence, remove your attention, deny access to your energy and insights, you deliver a punishment that cuts deeper than any verbal retaliation. This isn't about being petty or vindictive. It's about demonstrating through action that disrespect has real costs in the form of losing access to what you bring to their life. The impact of this approach creates lasting change in how people interact with you. They begin to understand that your presence is a privilege, not an entitlement, and that maintaining access requires maintaining respect. The revelations continue as you witness how differently people behave when they realize their actions have genuine consequences. Right actions have consequences. In the comments, if you're ready to understand how this principle of backed-up silence becomes the foundation for unshakable respect in every relationship and situation you encounter. Now, I want to go even deeper into the psychological mechanics of how lasting respect is actually built, because there's something profound that happens in the human mind when someone experiences the real consequences of crossing your boundaries. The pain of losing access to you, the sting of your absence, the realization of what they've lost through their poor choices. These experiences create memories that burn themselves into their consciousness. Unlike fleeting emotions that fade with time, remembered pain becomes a permanent teacher that shapes all their future interactions with you. This transformation in their behavior isn't based on fear alone, but on a deep understanding that their actions have weight in your world. They've learned through direct experience that you're not someone who makes empty threats or sets boundaries you won't enforce. The memory of that consequence becomes a constant advisor, whispering caution whenever they consider testing you again. They tread carefully, not because they hate you, but because they've felt the reality of your standards. But here's where the journey toward true personal power requires sophisticated understanding. If you operate purely through fear, creating only negative consequences and harsh punishments, you eventually breed resentment and rebellion. People will comply with your boundaries, but they'll also be constantly looking for ways to undermine you or escape your influence entirely. The relationship becomes purely transactional, built on coercion rather than genuine respect. Conversely, if you rely solely on being respected for your qualities, your kindness, your value, without any fear of consequences for mistreatment, you invite people to take advantage of your good nature. They'll appreciate you right up until it becomes convenient to disrespect you, knowing there won't be any real price to pay for their poor behavior. This is why so many genuinely good people find themselves repeatedly mistreated despite their obvious worth. The hidden truth that Machiavelli understood centuries ago is that sustainable power requires both elements working in harmony. People need to respect your value while simultaneously understanding that mistreating you comes with costs they don't want to pay. This balance creates relationships built on both appreciation and healthy caution, where others value what you bring to their lives while respecting the boundaries that protect your well-being. Behind the scenes of every successful leader's approach, you'll find what Machiavelli called the lion and the fox strategy. The lion represents raw strength, the ability to enforce consequences, to remove yourself from disrespectful situations, to demonstrate through action that your standards are non-negotiable. But the fox represents cunning intelligence, knowing when to reveal your strength and when to conceal it, understanding timing, reading situations with strategic precision. The transformation that occurs when you master both aspects is remarkable. You develop the wisdom to know when someone's boundary testing requires the immediate consequence of the lion, and when it calls for the patient observation of the fox. Sometimes the most powerful response is swift and decisive action. Other times, it's the careful gathering of intelligence while you plan your optimal moment to respond. The impact of this dual approach creates an aura that people can sense but can't quite define. They recognize that you possess both the strength to act and the intelligence to choose your battles wisely. Type, "I am both lion and fox" in the comments if you're starting to grasp how this sophisticated balance of strength and cunning could revolutionize your approach to every challenging relationship and conflict in your life. Now, I want to go even deeper into why this testing never stops, because there's something fundamental about human nature that most people don't understand. People will always test your boundaries, not because they dislike you or want to cause harm, but because it's hardwired into their psychological DNA. Just like children instinctively push against parental rules to see if they're real or just suggestions, adults continue this pattern throughout their lives. They're not consciously trying to disrespect you. They're unconsciously verifying whether your standards are authentic or performative. This constant testing is actually a form of psychological research that everyone conducts, often without realizing it. They want to know who you really are beneath your public presentation. Can you be manipulated? Do your boundaries crumble under pressure? Will you maintain your standards when it's inconvenient? Every interaction becomes a small experiment in discovering your true character, and your responses provide them with data they'll use in all future dealings. With you, the transformation occurs when you understand that this testing isn't personal, it's universal. Once you stop taking it as an attack and start seeing it as an opportunity to demonstrate your unshakable nature, everything changes. Each test becomes a chance to reinforce your reputation, to prove that your boundaries aren't subject to negotiation, to show that your standards remain consistent, regardless of who's challenging them. Behind the scenes of every respected person's journey, you'll find this pattern of unwavering consistency that eventually creates what I call fear-respect fusion. People begin to respect what they cannot control, what they fear to lose, and what clearly doesn't need them. When you embody these three qualities simultaneously, you develop a presence that bends rooms in silence. Others sense that you operate from a place of complete self-sufficiency, that their approval or disapproval doesn't affect your internal state, and that access to you is a privilege they could lose through poor choices. But here's where many people misunderstand the power of silence. Your silence must be filled with intent, loaded with purpose, radiating disciplined restraint rather than passive avoidance. When you don't respond to disrespect, it must be crystal clear that you're calculating rather than simply ignoring. The difference is palpable. Ignored disrespect suggests weakness or fear, while calculated silence suggests consequences are being weighed and determined. This intent-filled silence creates an entirely different energy in the room. People recognize that you're not hiding from confrontation. You're choosing your response with deliberate precision. That recognition creates respect mixed with healthy apprehension, because they understand they're dealing with someone who operates strategically rather than emotionally. This journey we've taken together through the principles of strategic silence and Machiavellian power represents more than just theory. It's a complete transformation in how you can approach every challenging interaction in your life. When you truly internalize these concepts, when your silence becomes intentional and your presence becomes magnetic, you join a small group of people who understand that true power doesn't announce itself. It simply exists, quietly commanding respect through unshakable consistency. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values depth over surface-level advice, someone who recognizes that lasting change requires understanding the psychology behind human behavior. That's exactly the kind of person I create content for, and I'd love to have you as part of this community. Subscribe to the channel, because what we explore here goes far beyond typical self-improvement. We dive into the real mechanics of influence, respect, and personal power that most people never discover. Drop a comment saying, "I control the room through silence," if you stayed with me until the very end of this video. I genuinely want to know who's committed to applying these principles in their own life, who's ready to transform from someone who reacts to disrespect into someone whose very presence prevents it from happening. Hit that like button because you and I have built something here together, an understanding of how true strength operates in a world full of noise and emotional chaos. Your like tells me this resonated, that you see the value in approaching power from this strategic, disciplined angle. There's a video right here that takes this foundation we've built and shows you exactly how to apply these principles in the most challenging situations you'll face. Click and continue with me over there, because once you understand the theory, the real transformation happens when you see it in action.